Everything is time, place and circumstances.
Brian Miller understands that for every man there comes a time, a place and a situation where he can make a difference, but only if he acts. This program, though it only scratches the surface, is a tribute to the work of Brian Miller over the past 4 decades and to the contribution he has made to the labour and peace movements over that period. It's a tribute to a man who saw injustice in the world and took action against it.
I started working in the building industry in the 1950s, and I've been very lucky to have worked on cabinet making, carpentry and joinery, and then went into cottages and then gone into construction work. The company I was working for went bankrupt, and I'd been a union member. I said to the workers, hey, this company's gone bankrupt, we're working for a subby. The boss is not going to give us stuff, he's gone, he's disappeared, I'm contacting the union. Oh, no, don't worry about the union, mate, we'll struggle on. I said, bullshit, I've got to pay for my car and I've got to survive. So that phone call had a very young organiser come out by the name of Don McDonald.
I first met him about 35 years ago, and it was on a Kellen Rigby construction site at the University of New South Wales.
Don come out. The end result is I stood up and was counted for. I stood up and supported the union, and the end results, Don McDonald got me to work direct for the principal builder. My wages were guaranteed. The blokes that didn't want to support the union scattered. To this day, they never got paid.
It was during this time that Brian came into contact with the men who would shape his thinking and inspire him to action.
There was a young carpenter there who I was impressed with his sincerity, and called a meeting, and he was nominated by one of his workmates as the delegate, and we worked together for more than 40 years after that.
We were then lucky enough to be surrounded by probably some of the best political operators Australia has ever known, the likes of the Pat Clancy's, the Tom MacDonalds, the Stan Sharkeys, who not only in the political sense had a great influence upon us, but imbued a sense of commitment and good politics in terms of taking the struggle up for building construction workers.
Pat Clancy inspired me to do the work that I should have been doing and should do for the working class movement. You felt that you were part of it. You wasn't beside it, you were actually part of it. And Pat had this incredible ability to bring people to him and inspire people.
We taught him about the need to be a united organisation, to be open with one another, to be critical, to have a real sense of comradeship.
Brian was a great organisational person, and he quickly assumed a lot of responsibility. At the end of the day, one could not have met another person with so much energy and so much commitment, and a person who was able to activate so many other people than Brian Miller.
You have a look at Brian after Cyclone Tracy hit Darwin. Brian headed up building workers that went to the Northern Territory and Darwin and carried out building work up there, and all voluntary stuff, and as a result the ACTU put Brian in charge of building workers up there.
Brian himself, he had the ability to get people to want to be part of his team thing, because he had a track record. He was a proven negotiator and a person that got things done.
More than anything, I think Brian understands that without collective organisation expressed through unions, workers' living standards would deteriorate. He understands that all of the standards that workers enjoy today have come about as a result of combined struggle of workers led by good, effective unions.
In the 70s and 80s, The men who were to shape the union movement today came into contact with Brian Miller.
First met Brian Miller 20 odd years ago when Brian was an organiser with the old BWIU.
When I started with the union, Brian was my mentor. I went out on building sites with Brian. I was his apprentice, and he was involved in training me for a number of years.
I started work here in 1980, and Brian Miller was one of the leading personalities, senior official, highly respected at all levels of the union back then, and a very warm and interesting sort of bloke, and naturally you quickly became friends with Brian Miller.
The appalling conditions on some building sites and resultant deaths in the industry steered Brian towards his passion, safety.
The driving force behind Brian is the fact that he was a building worker himself, came off the tools in the bad old days. When fellas of mine and Brian's age started in this industry, there was very little occupational health and safety. Brian, having lived through this, wanted to see that it would be a better life for other building workers that came behind him.
Look, going back 73, prior, even many years after, building construction workers did not have the basics on building construction sites. Often there was very poor safety, electrical, scaffolding. We were expected to hang over walls and lay bricks without scaffolding. So the level of accidents and the level of fatalities was extremely high.
There's no such thing as scaffolding. No scaffolding. Buildings go up 4, 5, 6 stories. No scaffolding, no nothing. Workers would fall off buildings. No such thing as sheds. Toilets would be a piece of flat iron against a fence or something. So conditions were appalling.
I really got to know Brian then in the 70s and the 80s when it was Rafferty's rules. On the Hilton Hotel, a lift cage, the lift shaft, they never had the protection around them that they've got now when they're building. There was a rigger married with 4 kids getting out into the swinging stage. He slipped and down he went. There was no fall protection in place. He fell all the way to the basement of the building, and there was a family, a wife and 4 kids left without a breadwinner. And it's all right to say, well, building workers responded and raised money for them. That only lasted a short period of time. The kids are without a father, and that sort of thing really hurt Brian. He would see something like that happen and say, this has never got to happen again. I've heard him say it, I can hear him say it now, this has never got to happen again.
Brian's impact on the movement over the years has been immense, and his reputation has been built on the unknown number of lives his work has saved.
I believe that every worker in our unions always have the philosophy, the policy, that every worker has the right to go to work in the morning in one piece and come home in one piece.
When it comes to the question of safety, Brian is a sort of legendary figure around the place. Everyone knows Brian. And the employers greatly respect and partly fear Brian because he's so tenacious about the issue of safety on the job, and he will do whatever is necessary to be done.
I think Brian's been involved in just about every significant event around rock health and safety in this industry, certainly since I can remember. And so I think the record speaks for itself. I don't think anybody, while they might have differences over the approach taken by Brian, or with the approach taken by Brian at different times, I don't think there's anybody would say that he hasn't made a significant contribution to improving the welfare of building workers in New South Wales.
He's been a key figure in improving safety for building workers in New South Wales. I mean, I've been involved now for about 16 years. I've watched a whole series of areas improve in the building industry, and it's people like Brian, and Brian in particular, who've really driven that agenda and forced through a lot of the change that people would have been reluctant to have implemented. I think without people like Brian, we wouldn't see the level of safety in the building industry that we see now.
why I've got such a high regard for him is that I know that if he knows that there's any danger there to any man that is on a building site, is that adamant that he'll get it fixed, that he'll close it upside down. That's when he goes to union, and I appreciate it because I know that he's working for me to get me back home to my family by night time.
You know, building workers today, even the young ones who don't know where all these standards came from, really need to be woken up to the fact that their forefathers, the Brian Mittlers of this world, built these standards, often through a lot of sacrifice, through strikes, stoppages, through losing wages, to try and build the standards that we have today.
You can get good wages, you can get good super, you can get A cert and all that, but it doesn't mean jack shit if you've lost your life and your family's lost a breadwinner.
Brian's sense of justice and fair play naturally led him into areas beyond the labour movement.
Brian, just as his experience as an organiser, and particularly around the safety issue which he took as his own, Brian almost became an evangelist for world peace.
Brian for decades has been actively involved in the struggle for world peace. He's played a central role in the Palm Sunday Coordinating Committee that organises annual rallies about the issue of world peace.
I've been involved with the World Peace Council. I'm also a World Peace Counsellor, and I'm also Director of the Australian Peace Committee. I've also been on the Hiroshima Day Committee, also on the Nuclear Disarmament Committee, and also the May Day Committee. And it's been a great honour to be involved with those groups. May Day, the Workers' Day. Year 2003, congratulations to workers all over the world for all the struggles they are fighting for workers, for better conditions and safety and world peace. Thank you.
I like to think of him as the voice of an ordinary fellow, tells it as it is. When we had our Palm Sunday meetings, there'd be a cross-section of people. Brian would get up and just say in a sentence how he felt, and you could always go by that as being really what people think.
He was the person that promoted the idea that we should seek to make every big job a peace job.
To turn up on the jobs, have meetings to get the job declared a peace meeting. As a matter of fact, in the old Intercontinental Hotel job down at Circular Quay, Brian brought the Indian chap who was ahead of the World Peace Movement along, and had one of the few all-site meetings. There's a lot of animosity then between the BLF and the BWIU, but Brian got them all together to talk about peace. It was a pretty good effort.
Brian's distinctive style and personality have become the stuff of legend.
Very, very solid in discussions, particularly if those discussions needed a bit more discussion.
Most union officials can talk the hind leg off a donkey, but Brian was probably better at it than a lot of people. And there are building workers I know that say when Brian started one of his peace speeches, they could duck across the road and have a couple of schooners and get back without the boss knowing, because that's how long the meeting was going to go.
I used to use Brian as a strategic weapon, because when I'd go on to a job and the boss was playing up, he was not acting in the best interest of the workers, not paying them properly or whatever, I'd say to him, look, if you don't concede to these demands, I'll send Brian Miller to the job. And the boss would say, hang on a minute, I'll agree to anything as long as you don't send Brian.
Man of few words. Well, what a joke. No, you definitely wouldn't describe Brian as a man of few words.
When he gets up to speak at Labor Council, and used to get up and speak at Labor Council, I used to always lean over the stage and say, mate, you've got 3 minutes and no more, we'll turn the microphone off. I think that was more a reflection though about how passionate Brian was about the issues that he was talking on. It certainly wasn't just getting up and speaking for the sake of hearing his own voice. I mean, he genuinely believed in what he was talking about, and I think that was it, but it was always a standing joke that I'd say, mate, 3 minutes, that's it.
I've had many experiences with Brian, and they've nearly all been enjoyable. You know, he can be cantankerous at times, and he can be long-winded at times, and pull bits of paper out of that bloody enormous briefcase of his, which has got crap going back to the 1970s in it. And he can be difficult at times, but we all love Brian, and he's just a marvellous human being, and he is our union. If you're going to pick a person that's got the spirit of our union, well, look at Brian Miller.
Brian Miller personifies the union at a time when workers' rights appear to have come full circle and are again under attack and being eroded as they were 150 years ago. The movement has greater need than ever for the Brian Millers of this world.
I mean, the building industry's an industry that's renowned for being unsafe, and it needs more people like Brian Miller to be there looking after the interests of workers, because I think as we continue to see pressures, economic pressures and costs being driven down, there's a tendency to try and compromise on safety, and I know that was one area that, as far as Brian was concerned, and quite rightly so, should not be compromised and should never be compromised.
Always won the issue for rank and file people. Absolute.
So many people owe so much to Brian Miller, and I just believe, you know, he's one of those unsung heroes of the building construction industry.
He represents all that is decent in humanity.
Brian, like in most of the other areas where he participates, he sees himself as a leader, because that's what he is. Quite often people need leadership. If you're going to involve people in taking dynamic action which is going to make a difference, you need leadership. You need leaders like Brian. And in fact today, more than ever, we need a lot more Brian Millers running around the place.
When we look at the community work and the social work we've done, I'm very proud of being a trade unionist, and I say to everyone out in the workplace, who can help you? It's your trade union. At the end of the day, it's the trade union movement that goes and helps and assists in these areas. Where would I be today without the trade union movement? I would be nowhere, because you can't do jack shit without the trade union movement. And I thank all of those delegates and safety reps and activists and members that supported me all of those years. And I thank you very much for your help and support. But I couldn't have done anything without the help and support of the workers.
The record shows I took the blow.